The storm came without warning, sweeping across the Arizona desert like a restless ghost. Lightning split the sky above a gas station where no one but shadows waited. Then, a white SUV rolled in, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. The back door opened, and a large German Shepherd was shoved into the rain. The door slammed, the car drove off, and the dog just stood there. He didn't bark, he didn't chase, he waited, with the kind of patience only heartbreak teaches. That was the moment everything began, not with a rescue, but with a betrayal that refused to be the end. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments, and if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you? Please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The town of Winslow, Arizona, nestled at the edge of the Painted Desert, held on to the night like an old ghost clinging to the remnants of its Wild West past. The wind swept across the highway in moaning bursts, pulling fine red dust across the dark asphalt, peppering the air with grains that clung to every surface. It was past midnight, and the only light for miles came from a flickering neon sign atop an old gas station. Clayton's Fuel and Snacks, the kind of place travelers pulled into out of necessity, not desire. A white sedan rolled to a slow stop by pump number 3. Its windows were tinted, and the headlights cut through the dusty air like silent knives. The engine didn't turn off, instead. The back door creaked open, and a large figure was pushed out onto the pavement, furred, confused, and trembling. The dog landed with a thump and scrambled toward the door, tail wagging with desperate hope. But before his paws could touch the threshold again, the door slammed shut. The sedan sped away, tires skidding slightly on the sandy concrete. Hunter was a 6-year-old German Shepherd with a thick sable and black coat now dulled with travel grime. His ears stood alert, but his eyes, deep brown and intelligent, were filled with disbelief. His frame was powerful, the kind bred for service and loyalty. Yet his body sagged with emotional weight as he stood motionless, staring into the darkness the car had vanished into. He sat, then lay down, then stood again, circling the pump like a ritual. The wind picked up, pulling at his fur. Rain began to spit from the sky, thin and biting, and still he remained. Each car that passed on the highway made his ears twitch. Each set of headlights held the possibility of return. But no one came. Across the street, behind a cracked window of a modest 2-story building, 12-year-old Eli Turner watched everything unfold. Eli had the gangly build of someone still growing into his bones. His hair was a messy tangle of sun-bleached brown curls, and his t-shirt, one size too big, hung off his shoulders like a loose curtain. He had freckles scattered like stars across his cheeks and a pair of alert, curious eyes that had learned to stay quiet. Eli was the only child of Margaret Turner, a tough and wiry woman who ran Turner's Market, the town's aging convenience store. Life hadn't softened Margaret. After her husband left 3 years ago, she buried her heart under late-night bookkeeping and long sighs. Home was not always warm for Eli, especially when arguments brewed over bills and broken appliances. He'd learned to slip out into the night to find space, calm, and silence. That night, he crept onto the flat roof above the store via the old fire escape and crouched with a flashlight, knees to his chest, from that high perch. Eli often watched the gas station across the street. It was the only thing open late besides the stars. Tonight, something different had drawn his attention: the abandoned dog. Eli had seen a lot of sad things in his 12 years. This, somehow, felt sadder. Hunter finally padded over to the edge of the building and curled beneath the rusted overhang, beside a vending machine humming in protest of the elements. Rain streaked down his back. He didn't cry, he didn't bark, he simply stared out into the road, soaked and waiting, inside the gas station. The cashier was fast asleep in the back room, unaware of the silent scene playing out just feet away. The night stretched on, but somewhere past the gas pumps, behind the tangle of mesquite trees and desert scrub, a different sound pierced the stillness. A whimper, faint, strained, and barely there. Hunter's ears perked. He lifted his head, uncertain whether he truly heard it or just imagined something to fill the void. A moment later, the sound came again. It was high-pitched and broken, like the weak cry of something very small, very afraid. Hunter stood. The rain beaded down his back as he walked toward the bushes at the edge of the lot. He stopped short. He looked back once at the road, as if still expecting the sedan to return. The road remained empty. The whimper returned. Hunter's instincts stirred. Something needed help. And despite the betrayal he had just suffered, the old loyalty in his heart had not withered. He stepped into the shadows, leaving behind the safety of the gas station's flickering lights. Back across the street, Eli sat upright. He had heard the cry too, and he saw the big dog, Hunter, vanish into the scrub brush beyond the fence. Eli didn't know it yet, but something had shifted inside him too. His fear of confronting things, his habit of hiding. It flickered. He pressed his hand against the glass window and whispered to himself, "Where are you going, buddy?" In that same moment, deep in the silence of a desert night and under the hum of storm-washed stars, the path of a lonely boy and a forsaken dog had begun to converge. The desert beyond Clayton's Fuel and Snacks was a labyrinth of dry grass, low mesquite trees, and weather-worn sandstone, shaped by decades of sun and silence, as Hunter padded cautiously through the brush. The wind stirred the shrubs with a dry rustle, and the earth under his paws was soft with recent rain. The night had quieted for now, broken only by the soft, desperate whimper that had first pulled him from his post at the gas station. Hunter moved with careful purpose, his nose low, ears pricked forward. Each step brought him deeper into darkness. But he did not waver. His body, bred for strength and alertness, responded automatically, though his heart still ached from the betrayal he'd suffered only hours before. His sense of duty, long trained and now reignited, pulled him forward. The sound came again, closer now, hidden beneath a tangle of brush. Hunter slowed and lowered his body, approaching the noise with a mix of caution and curiosity. He nosed aside a curtain of spindly branches, revealing a small hollow beneath a half-toppled juniper bush, curled tightly into the dirt. Trembling and covered in muck was a tiny German Shepherd mix puppy, no more than 6 weeks old. His fur was golden tan, matted with burrs and caked mud. One of his back legs was swollen and bent awkwardly, and his ribs pressed visibly against his skin. His eyes, round and liquid brown, watched Hunter with more fear than understanding. The puppy whimpered again, shrinking from the larger dog's shadow. Hunter took a single step back and sat, making no sound. Slowly, he lowered himself into a laying position, his body still but his eyes gentle and steady. For several long minutes, he didn't move. Then, with a careful motion, he inched forward, lowering his head and giving a single soft whine, low, kind, almost like a whisper. The puppy didn't run. He only shivered harder, but his eyes softened slightly. Hunter extended his nose and gently nudged the pup's side. it was a gesture of reassurance, one he'd learned long ago, slowly, cautiously. The puppy leaned into the touch. They stayed there until the sky began to brighten, a slow blue creeping over the horizon. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the desert slick and quiet. Hunter, ever watchful, gently took the puppy by the scruff, as a mother would, and began the slow walk back toward the gas station. Ben Clayton was already awake, standing behind the scratched glass door of his gas station and sipping coffee from a cracked ceramic mug that read Route 66 Survivor. He was a man in his late 60s, with a sun-worn face, silver beard, and lean frame hardened by decades of manual work. His coveralls were always stained with oil, and his boots had more miles than most people's cars. Ben wasn't the type to say much, but when he did, his words came measured and true. He had seen the big dog the night before, lying by the vending machine like a ghost in the storm. He hadn't approached, unsure if the dog was wild or waiting for someone. But this morning, something tugged at him, something in the way the dog had stood so still, so faithful. So when Ben heard soft scratching at the front of the store, he opened the door, expecting the dog might have left in the night. Instead, he froze. There stood the German shepherd, soaked, dirty, and proud, with a tiny puppy hanging from his mouth. "Well, I'll be damned," Ben muttered. Hunter placed the pup gently on the doormat. The little one gave a weak yelp, then collapsed in a heap. Ben crouched, his knees popping with the motion. "You dragged this baby all the way out there?" he asked the dog. Hunter sat beside the puppy and gave a single, slow blink. Ben reached out carefully, his calloused hand brushing against the puppy's cold fur. "You're a stubborn old soul, huh?" he said to Hunter, who didn't move but watched his every gesture with a steady gaze. Ben stood and disappeared inside, returning with a towel and a shallow metal bowl filled with warm water. He dabbed the puppy's fur gently, cleaning away some of the mud. Then he fetched a can of chicken from the tiny fridge behind the counter, his lunch, and poured it into a dish. Hunter, watching, made no move to eat instead. He nudged the bowl toward the puppy with his snout. Inside the store, the air smelled faintly of rubber, gasoline, and sun-warmed shelves of snack cakes. Outside, the desert began to dry in the early morning heat, but under the shade of the gas station awning, something soft and fragile had begun to grow. Across the road, Eli Turner had returned to his rooftop perch. He hadn't slept much. The sound of the puppy's cry and the sight of the big dog disappearing into the dark had kept his heart pounding. But when he saw Hunter return at dawn, carrying something small and helpless, he sat straighter, from his distance. Eli couldn't see the puppy clearly, but he saw how Ben knelt down and gently wrapped the small form in a towel. He saw the way Hunter stood watch, never stepping away. The boy's chest tightened with something he didn't have a name for. Curiosity, awe, maybe even a bit of hope, later that morning, after breakfast with his mom. Eli returned to the roof with a pair of binoculars he'd once used to watch hawks near the canyon. Through them, he saw Ben setting up a cardboard box with a blanket near the gas station wall. Hunter lay beside it, the puppy curled up at his side. Eli frowned and whispered to himself. "Who are you two?" He made a promise, silently, he would find out, even if it meant talking to old Mr. Clayton, who was famous for scaring off kids with a glare alone. Something in this was worth the risk. By the end of the week, the quiet town of Winslow had started to whisper. It began at the bakery, where customers lingered longer than usual over their coffee. Then came the murmurs in the aisles of Turner's Market, where Margaret Turner noticed the same question surfacing again and again. Have you heard about the dog at Clayton's, the big one who brought in a puppy, in a town where excitement rarely stretched beyond a high school football game or a flash flood warning? Hunter's silent heroism had become a quiet legend. And then, just as the morning sun turned the highway into a river of gold, the white SUV arrived. It rolled into the dusty parking lot of Clayton's Fuel and Snacks without the usual rattle of old pickups or the hum of friendly regulars. This car was newer, cleaner, too clean. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out first. He was in his early 40s, tall and lean with a sharp jawline and buzz-cut hair. He wore a black windbreaker zipped up to the neck and sunglasses, though the morning light was soft. There was something stiff in the way he moved, like a man used to control. The passenger door opened, and a woman followed, mid-30s, with a red scarf wrapped carefully around her dark hair. She clutched her purse close to her body. Her expression flickered between concern and calculation. Her name was Melinda Kane, and the man was Travis Kane, her husband. They walked toward the gas station entrance together, boots crunching softly against the gravel. Hunter, who had been lying beside Waffles in a shaded box near the ice machine, stood at once. His hackles rose, not in violence but in alarm. His gaze fixed directly on the approaching pair. Ben Clayton was inside, restocking shelves with methodical focus, when the chime over the door rang. He looked up and squinted at the couple. "Morning," he greeted, wiping his hands on a rag. "Need gas?" Travis shook his head. "No, sir. We're here about the dog, the puppy. Actually," Ben tilted his head. "Puppy. The one your shepherd brought in, he's ours," Melinda said quickly, stepping forward with a hopeful smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Is that right?" Ben asked. His voice was polite, but cool. "You got any proof of that?" "No, we lost him a few days ago," Travis replied, avoiding Ben's gaze. He slipped his collar out near the canyon. He must have wandered here. Ben glanced out the window where Hunter now stood over Waffles, who peeked up at the movement, tail thumping softly against the blanket. "If he's yours," Ben said slowly, "you ought to come say hello. Let's see how he reacts." The couple followed him out. As they approached, Hunter stepped forward. His body blocked Waffles from view. His ears were stiff, eyes dark and unblinking. A low growl rumbled in his chest, not aggressive, but deeply protective. Melinda took a cautious step closer, arm outstretched. "Come here, baby," she cooed. Hunter growled louder. Waffles whimpered and crawled back beneath the towel. Travis frowned and made a move forward, but Ben put a hand out. Firm. "I wouldn't do that," he warned. "He doesn't look like your dog knows you," Ben said, voice hardening. Melinda hesitated, her hand frozen mid-air. "Maybe he's just scared," she muttered. Hunter barked, one deep, thunderous sound that sent both of them back a step. Travis narrowed his eyes, jaw clenched. "We'll be back," he said, "with someone who'll listen." Ben didn't flinch. "You go right ahead." The SUV drove off, tires spitting gravel in frustration. Later that afternoon, Eli approached the station from across the road, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich wrapped in napkin and tucked in his pocket. His steps were slow and hesitant. He'd seen the SUV from his window, seen the confrontation. He didn't understand it all, but he knew the feeling of people pretending to care, wearing fake smiles. He'd seen it after his brother died. All those neighbors with their casseroles and sympathy cards. Then silence. He found Hunter sitting by the back corner of the station, Waffles dozing beside him. "Hey," Eli said softly. Hunter looked up. His gaze met the boy's, and there was something calmer now in his expression. "I brought you something," Eli continued, holding out the sandwich. He sat a few feet away and placed it on the concrete between them. Hunter didn't rush. He sniffed, took a bite, then sat again, quietly chewing. Eli smiled, then looked down at his sneakers. "My brother used to train dogs," he said after a long pause. "Rescue dogs, for search and rescue. His name was Miles." Hunter tilted his head slightly. He was good at it, said dogs were better than people, said they always meant what they felt. Eli blinked fast. "He died last year, car accident. Mom doesn't like talking about him." Hunter moved closer and lay down. Eli looked up, surprised. "You remind me of one of his dogs. That one was named Atlas. He was huge, quiet, too, but loyal." Hunter rested his head on his paws, close to the boy's sneakers. A soft moment of shared stillness passed between them. Boy and dog, both carrying wounds the world couldn't see. "I don't think that couple was really Waffles' family," Eli whispered. Hunter's tail thumped once in agreement, from the shadows. Ben watched them through the office window. He saw something unfold that he hadn't expected. Trust. Fragile, but forming. That night, as the sun dipped low behind the mesas and the sky turned bruised purple, Ben placed a sign on the front window. "Found puppy. Please provide proof of ownership. Ask inside." He added another bowl of water outside and beside it. He left a second sandwich, this one made by his own hands. Quietly, without comment. The air inside Winslow's small-town courthouse was tight with anticipation. Light filtered through dusty windows and muted shafts, casting long rectangles across the rows of wooden pews that lined the gallery. It wasn't often a courtroom filled like this. But this wasn't just a court case. It was about Hunter, about Waffles, and for many, about something far bigger. Loyalty, truth, and the kind of justice a small town still believed in. Ben Clayton sat in the front row, wearing his cleanest denim shirt, the collar stiff from ironing. He looked older today, not in years, but in burden. Beside him sat Eli Turner, his hair combed down and shirt buttoned awkwardly to the neck. His hands fidgeted in his lap, but his eyes were sharp. He wasn't here just as a spectator. He had helped gather the truth. Across the aisle, Travis and Melinda Kane sat with their attorney, Darla Mendez, a woman in her late 50s with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. Darla wore a steel gray pantsuit, her silver hair pulled back into a severe bun. She had built her reputation handling property disputes and difficult divorces in Flagstaff, and she did not appreciate being dragged to Winslow over 2 dogs. Her strategy was clear from the moment she stood. "These animals," she said coolly, "are the legal property of my clients, who simply lost them during a camping trip. They were not abandoned. Any evidence suggesting otherwise is speculative and emotionally colored." Judge Harold Latham, a thick-set man in his early 70s with tufts of white hair and reading glasses perpetually slipping down his nose, raised a hand. "We'll see what the footage shows before we determine what's speculative." Ms. Mendez. Judge Latham had served Winslow for decades. He'd married folks, buried others, and once stopped a bar fight with nothing more than a look. He believed in second chances, but not in liars. Ben nodded to the bailiff, who connected a flash drive to the overhead projector. The grainy black and white security footage flickered onto the wall, the white SUV pulling into the gas station after midnight, the back door opening, Hunter being pushed out, then, minutes later, the woman stepping from the car, laying down a small bundle. Waffles in the mesquite brush before driving away. The room was silent. Eli glanced at Hunter, who lay calmly at Ben's feet. The big dog's eyes didn't leave the screen. Darla Mendez stood again, her voice firmer now. There could be other explanations. The video lacks audio. Perhaps they were looking for help. Perhaps they returned later. The judge frowned. Did they report the dogs missing to local authorities? Ben stood. No, Your Honor. No one came forward until after the story spread. And the boy, Judge Latham, gestured to Eli. I understand you have something to add. Eli stood slowly. His voice trembled, but steadied with each word. I saw them, the same people in that SUV. They came back a few days later. They said the puppy was theirs, but Hunter growled and blocked them. Waffles ran and hid. If they were his real owners, he wouldn't be scared like that. Judge Latham nodded slowly, then turned to Ben. And you've cared for the animals since then? Yes, sir. Every day, food, shelter, vet visits paid from my own pocket. I'm not looking to claim them for myself if there's a better home out there. I just want them safe. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gallery. At that moment, a woman entered quietly through the back door. She wore a tan trench coat and carried a folder under her arm. She nodded to the judge and approached the front, introducing herself as Sarah Holloway, a representative from the Arizona Humane Network. Sarah was tall, slender, with shoulder-length auburn hair, a calm face, and the kind of steady presence that made people lower their voices around her. Her job had taught her how to stay composed in courtrooms, shelters, and sometimes crime scenes. I reviewed the footage, she said. I also conducted behavioral evaluations. Hunter exhibits classic signs of betrayal, trauma, alertness, protectiveness, social hesitancy. Waffles shows attachment response toward Mr. Clayton and the boy, but fear-based reactions to the claimants. She opened the folder, laying down copies of her notes. In my professional opinion, returning these animals to the Canes would constitute neglect. Their bond with Mr. Clayton and the boy is demonstrably strong and emotionally necessary. Darla tried to object, but Judge Latham raised a hand. I've heard enough. He removed his glasses and looked out at the room. The silence felt heavy. The law recognizes animals as property, he said, but any fool knows they're more than that. What I see here is not just abandonment, but the miracle of recovery. The boy, the man, the dogs, they found each other. He cleared his throat. Therefore, I rule that both animals will remain in protective custody under Mr. Clayton's supervision, with support from the Arizona Humane Network until a permanent, safe home is determined. The Canes' claim is denied. The courtroom erupted in soft cheers. Ben reached down and scratched Hunter behind the ears. Eli smiled, blinking quickly as if fighting tears. Travis Kane stood, furious, but said nothing. Melinda pulled on his arm, and they left without another word, outside. The afternoon sun baked the red pavement, but in front of the courthouse steps, a crowd had already gathered. Reporters, local families, children holding signs that read, "Protect Hunter and Waffles deserves love." Sarah Holloway stood beside Ben, speaking to press, while Eli crouched next to the dogs, offering a handful of beef jerky he'd saved from lunch, for the first time in days. Hunter wagged his tail more than once. Winslow's days stretched longer in early spring, the horizon pulling in gold and coral as if it too had grown tired of holding on to gray. The courthouse ruling had come and gone, but its impact lingered like a warm echo through town. For many, the case was about more than two dogs. It had become a mirror reflecting what was good and steadfast in people's hearts. and for 3 souls who had once been broken in their own quiet ways. It marked the start of something whole. Eli Turner's house sat just a few blocks from the gas station, tucked behind a wind-worn picket fence and shaded by an aging cottonwood tree that rattled gently in the breeze. It wasn't a big house, just 2 bedrooms and a porch that sagged slightly on one side, but for Hunter and Waffles. It was home, Eli had insisted. Nearly begged his mother, Margaret, to let them stay. It had taken long talks and quiet tears. Margaret, usually rigid in habit and emotion, had finally said yes, not because she understood what the dogs meant, but because for the first time since her eldest son's death, she saw something alive return to Eli's eyes. Margaret Turner was a woman in her early 40s with prematurely graying hair pulled into a loose knot, always in a hurry and rarely without an apron smeared in flour. Her posture carried years of self-reliance, but there was softness under the surface, buried, guarded. She had once been warm and open, a church choir soprano with a laugh that filled rooms, until the day she lost Miles in a crash caused by a drunk driver. Since then, grief had hardened her into efficiency, but even she couldn't deny the change in Eli. He came home earlier, he talked more. He smiled at the breakfast table, and he wasn't alone anymore. Hunter adapted to the house with quiet grace. He claimed a spot beside Eli's bed, his broad chest rising and falling with the boy's breaths at night. During the day, he padded silently after Eli from room to room, pausing only to glance toward the front door whenever a strange car passed by. It would take time for that instinct to fade, the fear that someone might try to take him or Waffles away again. But Eli's hand on his back was often enough to soothe it. Waffles, on the other hand, was all chaos and joy. The little puppy had regained weight, and with it came a burst of energy that no room could contain. His legs were still a little wobbly, and the injured paw had healed into a slight limp, but it never slowed him down. He chased socks, tumbled downstairs, and yipped at his own reflection in the oven glass. Hunter tolerated the madness with the patience of an old guardian, occasionally nudging Waffles gently away from wires, steps, and sharp corners with the practiced grace of a veteran caretaker. Outside, the neighborhood had begun to notice. Kids from nearby houses stopped by to ask if they could pet the hero dog, and parents waved at Margaret more often now. It felt, for the first time in a long time, like a family lived there again. Sarah Holloway, the Humane Network officer, continued to check in weekly. She never stayed long, but always arrived with a clipboard, a soft smile, and a bag of dog biscuits. Sarah had grown up in a foster system and knew what it meant to belong nowhere. She made it her life's mission to make sure no animal or child ever felt the same. Every time she saw Hunter laying calmly in Eli's lap, while Waffles snoozed across the boy's feet, she marked her notes with a little star. At the gas station, Ben Clayton kept things simple, as he always had. But something had shifted there, too. He placed a new sign near the pumps. Clean water bowl for all critters, strays. Welcome. He kept a box of kibble under the counter and often found himself checking the horizon for new shadows on the road. The story of Hunter and Waffles had become part of local folklore. A high school art class painted a mural on the side of the library. Hunter, noble and proud, standing over Waffles in a desert sunrise. A little girl named Mia brought Eli a drawing of the dogs. Smiling brightly with glitter-covered fur, he kept it tacked above his desk, and so the days moved on. Eli began sleeping better. He brought Hunter to therapy sessions once a week. Margaret's idea, surprisingly, and the counselor noted that the dog's presence reduced the boy's anxiety more than any breathing exercise ever had. Hunter would lie beside the couch, chin on paws, eyes watchful but serene, as Eli spoke about Miles for the first time in nearly a year. One evening, just before sunset, the trio walked out to the open field behind their home. It was a place Eli used to avoid, a stretch of dry grass and sandstone boulders that once felt too quiet. Now, it rang with the sound of Waffles barking at butterflies and Hunter's paws crunching over dry earth. Eli ran ahead, arms outstretched, laughter rising with the wind. Hunter followed at a calm trot, ears perked, and Waffles bounded after both of them like a pinball in tall grass. Margaret stood at the back porch, arms crossed, but there was a hint of a smile tugging at her mouth. She didn't call out to them. She simply watched. The sun dropped slowly behind the red rock cliffs to the west, casting long shadows over the field. The sky lit up in hues of orange, pink, and gold, a painted promise that no matter how dark a chapter may begin, it could always end in light, and in that moment, as Eli knelt to hug both dogs, their tails wagging in harmony, there were no words needed. They had found their way home, not just to a house or town, but to each other, a boy, a big shepherd, and a puppy with a crooked paw, tied not by blood, but by something stronger, survival, love, and a loyalty earned under stars and storm. Sometimes. The greatest miracles are not loud or sudden, they come quietly, in the form of a wounded puppy found beneath a bush, or a loyal dog who refuses to give up. In the story of Hunter, Waffles, and Eli, we see that even after betrayal, heartbreak, and silence, healing is still possible, not because of anything grand, but because of love. It reminds us that God often works through small hands and quiet hearts, through the boy who dared to hope again, the man who gave shelter without asking, and the dog who stayed faithful even when left behind. In our own lives, we may feel abandoned, broken, or overlooked, but there is always a new beginning waiting just beyond the pain. If we have the courage to walk forward, just like Hunter did, just like Eli did. So, if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share it with someone who might need a reminder that love still wins. Comment your thoughts. Tell us if you've ever experienced a moment like this, and if you believe in second chances, in quiet miracles, and in the healing power of love. Type Amen in the comments. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and uplift, and may God bless you and your loved ones with the same kind of grace that brought a boy, a dog, and a lost puppy into one another's lives. May you always find your way home.